over the whole of Jesus' life, and then we hit this point of death, and we celebrate, commemorate is probably the right word. We don't celebrate, but we commemorate. We know that this is a difficult day, a hard day, and so we go through and we endure, but we know that greatness is just around the corner. Sunday is only a couple of days away, and we'll be able to celebrate and have more joy. But because we already know the end of the story, right? Like we can have a little bit of joy now. And so as we go through, what I want to pull out of the passage today, Jesus has been saying throughout the book of John, as we've been looking at over the past few months, he uses a number of statements that begin with "I am." And in the Greek language this is recorded in, that is the two words ego eimi, and it's from a more ancient kind of Hebrew background, which referred to the name of God. So in the Old Testament it would be Yahweh, but the Hebrew people didn't want to, or the Jewish people didn't want to say God's name. They held it in such high regard that they wouldn't say his name frivolously. And then when it was translated into the Greek, it became ego eimi, and so every time Jesus said "I am," he was referencing himself as being God. And as we've been discovering this, it gives us different aspects. Each of the "I am" statements gives us another little taste of who Jesus is. And today we come to a passage in John chapter 14, and Jesus says, "I am the way." Now, to give you some background to this, to give you some context, the Easter week begins with Palm Sunday, and there was excitement. Jesus had done amazing things throughout his 3 years where he was engaging with people in the region of modern-day Israel or Palestine. He connected with so many people, did so many things, and then this final 7 days becomes a real peak. There's a lot of information, a lot of story. Starts with Jesus walking into the capital city of the country, Jerusalem, and as he came in, he rode actually on a donkey, and that was a sign, a prophetic kind of sign of the coming king coming into Jerusalem humbly on a donkey, and people had been hearing all these amazing things that Jesus was doing and saying, and so they got palm branches. They cut palm branches and were waving them, again as a sign of Jesus' greatness. They would take their cloaks off and put it in front of the donkey as a sign of, "Wow, you're so great. Don't even walk on the pavement. Walk on my cloak. I placed that down before you, a sign of honor." Jesus came in with great fanfare. Everyone was so excited that finally the Messiah, the Savior, had come. They sang Hosanna, which is a Hebrew word meaning God will come to save us. God has come to save us. It was kind of a praise, but also an expectation. So Jesus comes in on Sunday with, everyone screaming excited. But there was a group of people. There was a group of religious people who believed that they followed God and were doing all the right things, and they were hearing Jesus saying this, and they couldn't get into their head that the God of heaven could ever come down in such a humble form as a man. They couldn't get their head around all the things that Jesus was saying and doing, even though he was doing miraculous signs that they couldn't speak against. But that they were just frustrated. This Jesus wasn't the kind of God that they thought, they expected, they had hoped for. And so they started to plot and scheme and undermine Jesus. They came up with a plan to have him killed. And so as we go through Easter week, there's kind of like a group of followers, diehard, "We're going to be with you forever, Jesus." There was a group of religious leaders who were against Jesus, kind of plotting for his downfall. And then you had the middle people, the regular everyday, who had heard things and had expectations and this hope from different prophecies in the past. They're like, "Oh, this could be Jesus, the Messiah." They were also wavering and kind of going, "Yeah, but the religious leaders, the people who run the temple, they're against Jesus. So where do I stand? I don't know." And there was this tension within the city, and it led up to the feast, the celebration of Passover, which happens on Friday, starting Friday evening. But before that, Jesus got his disciples and said, we're going to celebrate Passover on the Thursday evening. And so the passage we're looking at today is kind of 24 hours before Jesus is put into the tomb, right? So in this 24-hour period, a lot happens, a lot of tension, a lot of things that were being talked about. And so Jesus, as he sat and had a meal with his disciples, he said a lot of different things. If you look through the biographies of his life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's a lot of teaching that he does as he sits around the table with his disciples. And one of the things he says is this: do not let your hearts be troubled. Now, whenever someone says something like that, you know that trouble's about to come, right? It's like saying, don't be offended by this, but you know you're going to be offended. It's kind of like a thing to say. I'm about to offend you, but don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have not told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the place where I am going. I remember when I did Bible college, there was a number of times where I would be sitting there and listening to the lecturer, and it would be kind of like, you know how Yoda speaks in a really weird way, and you're listening, you're like, I know that's English, but whatever he just said, I don't fully comprehend. It's going over my head because it's way too smart for me. And I'm sitting there, and because I'm a man, I didn't want to say anything. It's like asking directions, right? If you're the one who asked for directions, you've lost. Better for a man to just keep driving, because surely we're getting closer to something, than to stop and ask directions. In the same way, Bible college, I'm not going to say anything here, because what if I said, I don't understand, and everyone else is like, what? Are you some sort of imbecile? And so I kept my mouth shut. But thankfully, for this context, for Jesus sitting with his disciples, Thomas pipes up and said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus, you keep speaking in riddles, keep speaking in parables. You make things so difficult for us. You're saying, you know the way, guys, don't you? And everyone else is saying nothing. But Thomas stands up and says, man, I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to say, Jesus, we have no idea what you're talking about, okay? Now, there are a lot of places within the scriptures where I think the disciples, they actually said this, and sometimes I think they just stay quiet thinking someone else in this group surely knows what Jesus is talking about. But in this case, Thomas pipes up, man, we don't know what you're talking about. Help me out here, Jesus. Jesus answered, helpfully, he said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, I don't think this helped clear things up a whole lot, but I think when Jesus said that, it helps to clear it up a lot for us. This passage is so full of so much that unpacks the whole Jesus story in this one sentence: I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. When we think about Good Friday, it's the day that, as we've been singing and saying and explaining in the video, it keeps coming back to this idea, this understanding that God, in all his infinite wisdom and love, knew that we had a problem. And our problem is that, we get, if you're watching the news and you see someone has killed someone, I'll speak for myself. I kind of think to myself, man, I hope they find that person, and if they're guilty, I hope they go to jail and they pay the penalty for the things they've done wrong, right? Or if you hear about, if you hear about someone who's been scammed. Anyone ever heard of someone who's been scammed? Thank you, Drew, good, enthusiastic. Everyone, you could say it that loud and that would be good. If you've heard of someone being scammed, you're like, your heart breaks for that person. You clicked that link. You gave them your bank details. You sent that. You shouldn't have done that. You know that in hindsight, but when you're in the middle of it, it seems so believable. When we see, Sims show me these ones where people scam the scammers and get them and stuff. I love that. It's justice, right? Yeah, get them, tear down their business model. That's good. They pay. They should go to jail. They should be dealt with justice for things that are done wrong. Or if you've ever seen, we don't like using the word karma, it's not what we believe in, but have you ever seen those videos that are kind of titled Instant Karma, and someone walks in to a shop to stick it up, and then they trip and fall, and the gun falls, and then someone from behind the shop counter comes with a baseball bat and hits them, and you're like, that is so funny. And also, justice. And is anyone else like them? Is that just me? Okay, less people are enthusiastic about the baseball bat, but you get the idea, right? When we see someone doing something wrong, we feel, I hope they get justice. We hope that something happens so that they go to jail, get dealt with. They don't keep doing that. We don't want that to keep happening. So we have a big, like a gauge for justice. We really want justice when things are done wrong to people. We're not so excited about justice when we do things wrong. Does anyone love punishment here? Anyone just think, yes, I'm just so grateful for my parents. They disciplined me because I did something wrong, and I really appreciated that. Rarely do we ever go, yes, discipline. Come on, I love discipline. Yes, punishment. I did something wrong, or I put up my hand. Yep, I said the wrong thing. I hurt that person. We don't do so well with ourselves. We're great at seeing the problems and faults in other people. God, the God of the universe, who sees every one of us, who knows us intimately, who knows everything we've ever done and ever thought and ever said and ever hurt someone and ever hurt him and ever offended the world that he created. And God, in his infinite wisdom, sees the things that we do wrong, and we call that wrong sin. And because we keep doing these wrong things, and because he's a just God, he needs to deal with that sin. And heaven being a perfect place, we can't go into heaven with all of this weight of sin. And so God, in his incredible love and humility and wisdom, saw that the only way that we could be freed from this prison cell of our own wrongdoing was if he came and paid the punishment for us. We call it Good Friday because it wasn't good for Jesus, but it's so good for us. Because on this day, 2,000 years ago, we remember the pain and suffering that Jesus had to go through so that we could have life. When we read Jesus saying, I am the way, Jesus wasn't saying, I'm the way, I'm going to go and suffer, the next day. As he's saying this to disciples Thursday night, Friday, he's hanging on a cross. He'd been beaten, he'd been tried a few times, he'd been spat on, he'd been abused. He's not saying, I'm the way, follow me, and then expecting them all to go to the cross. He's saying, I'm the way, I'm going to the cross so that you don't have to. Isn't that good news? I think Lou has got this one. I think you guys need to be a little bit more enthusiastic because it's Good Friday, because the way is that we don't have to go through the punishment for our own suffering, and instead we allow him to go through that so that we don't need to. We follow him as the way. So Jesus said, I'm the way, follow me. You won't have to go through that, but instead you will have access into the kingdom of heaven if you allow me to take away all the bad that you've done. If you follow me, if you believe in me, if you trust in me, if you let me lead you in life. Jesus said he is the way. He then said he is the truth. Eden's just going to come, preach it up like his dad. He then said he is the truth. Now, in our culture, in our society today, truth is a lot more, let's say, fluid than it was maybe only 20 or 30 years ago. People speak about, well, you have your truth and I'll have my truth, but my truth and your truth might be different. And when Jesus said he is the truth, then we have to say, okay, well, if he's the truth, if he is the standard of truth, if we base truth on him, then everything that we might believe, you might believe, she might believe, he might, we have to submit that to him and say, well, if he is the truth, then I believe and follow his truth, not mine. If he's God, then I listen and I come under his truth. I don't try to dominate and say, well, I'm more God than you are and my truth is going to rule over you. When we look at Jesus as the truth, we need to look at, well, did Jesus even exist? Modern historians would all say that there was definitely a man named Jesus who lived in that time, who said things, who did things. There is so much overwhelming historical and archaeological evidence of the early church, of Jesus' existence, that modern secular non-Christian historians would say, yep, Jesus existed. Then we look and we see, well, the things that he said. He was so radical in the things that he said, and that they were written down. the Western world has been based on, been transformed and changed by the ethic of grace, of giving to those who haven't earned it, giving to the poor, helping. There's so much in what we do today that comes from the truth that Jesus shared. His teachings were so radical and different from the teachings of the world. It was so far outside that no one could have made it up. And so we see that the words Jesus, and so many people would say, oh yeah, Jesus, he was a great guy. You know, he spoke down to the religious leaders who tried to push everyone around. He spoke, and he said some amazing words of wisdom and truth. Yeah, I love what Jesus said. But then you've got to look at the same people who wrote those 4 biographies of Jesus' life and wrote all those things about the truth, also wrote that he did amazing things, amazing miracles. And so if Jesus is the truth, then we believe he was a man and he said all these amazing things. The same people wrote down that he did all these miraculous things as well. And if Jesus did all these miraculous things, then we see that people were changed by the things that he did. People who were lame got their legs. People who without sight could see. There was so much evidence that the miracles, they were actually challenged and attested. And so we see, well, he did miraculous things. They've been proven that he did them. And then we come to today, the cross and the resurrection. And then we see the people who then willingly went, who saw him alive, saw him dead, and saw him alive again. And then they lived the rest of their life to prove, to share with everyone they possibly could, without any monetary gain for themselves, without any fame for themselves. They said, because of what Jesus did, because I cling to this, because I believe in it, because I saw it, I want to tell everyone I can. And so when we look at the thousands of lives, especially those 10 disciples who were killed for what they believed, the many others who were early Christians who went to the lions and the Colosseum, when you look at the weight of evidence that expresses that Jesus is who he said he was, when we read that Jesus is the way, and if we follow him, then he's also the truth, we start to get this understanding. Man, this is someone that I want to connect with. I want to understand. I want to dig into a little bit deeper. He said he is the way and the truth and the life. And we talked about this a few weeks ago when we looked at Jesus, when he said, I am the bread of life. And there are 2 different kinds of life that the language of their day. There was one life that was bios, that speaks about living things, living matter. And then there's another word called zoe, which speaks of the kind of life that you want to live. It's like thriving in life. It's like enjoying the fullness of life. It's like connecting with the God of heaven and living the kind of life that we were designed to live. That's the zoe life. And so when Jesus says, if you follow me, the way, if you believe in me, the truth, then you will have the kind of life that fulfills you in a way that this world could never fulfill you. I read an article just this week in a magazine called Relevant Magazine, a Christian magazine, and it was this lady who was a massive influencer, someone who did fitness and who was paid to put posts up and things like that. In our world standards, especially for a lot of young people, influencers are the ones that are kind of like up there. They're like, wow, you made it as an influencer. You're getting paid a lot of money to do these things, to live this life. And she said that she got to the end of time doing this and she just was unfulfilled. She didn't feel as though she had the kind of life that she thought that she would have when she achieved the amount of followers and likes and financial contribution coming in from the things that she was doing. And she changed her life and she now follows Jesus. And she said in that shift, in that change of life, she went from being someone who was unfulfilled to being fulfilled. Because now she has life. She has the kind of life that means she's thriving. She's connected to the God of heaven. That means that no longer is she expectant and waiting on other people's likes and approval, because now she has the approval of the creator of the universe. Isn't that an amazing thing? Isn't that a hope-filled thing? Isn't that something that resonates with us when we think about the kind of life that we want? Don't we want the kind of life that is fulfilling? That is connected to the creator of heaven, that is forgiven, that is hope-filled, that is true life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The final important thing that I think that we need to engage with this passage of Scripture is that in our modern context, in our day, the idea of an exclusive truth claim, no one gets to the Father except through me, is a claim that a lot of people would throw out and reject and say, oh, no, surely there's got to be a lot of different ways to get to heaven. No, surely, you have your way, but I'm going to have my way. You do your thing, but I'm going to take my way. This exclusive truth claim from Jesus is saying that there is only one way to get to heaven, and that's through him. That's pretty exclusive. That means that those people who believe in Hinduism or Muhammad, those people who are Buddhists, those people who are Jehovah's Witnesses, those people who have a different faith pathway are wrong. That's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I am the way, which means that every other way is wrong, is not the way, is not the pathway to heaven. Now that kind of conflicts in us. I know that there's kind of like I don't know, could that be true? And so I'll just leave you with two thoughts on that. When we think about the exclusivity of this claim of Jesus, I am the way, the only way. When we think about that and we naturally want to reject that, I just want to think about the kind of people that Jesus interacted with. Jesus interacted with people from his country, the Jewish people, but also people from outside of his country. And actually, the early church very quickly became more non-Jewish than Jewish. Very quickly, people who weren't part of the nation of Israel started to become Christians, and now world over, there is way more people who are not Jewish than those who are Jewish. Jesus came to save humanity. He wasn't exclusive. He opened himself up for everyone to come. He went and connected with those who had wealth, and he engaged them in that wealth, but he also engaged with so many who were poor. He engaged with those people who had diseases, who were broken in their bodies, those people who were broken because of their sin, those people who were far away from what the Jewish religious people said were good people. Jesus engaged with those people who were aligning themselves with the Roman government. All these different kind of people Jesus engaged with because he wants to open the door to everyone. Anyone who wants to come are welcome. But we can only come through one way, and that's through a relationship with Jesus. And that brings us to this final point. This exclusivity, this one way. I mean, if we were God, would we want there to be multiple ways, or does it make more sense to have one? When we think about the creator of the universe, having a plan, coming and finding a way, is it the right thing for him to have one way, or should he have many ways? And when we start to think, well, I think that God should have done this, he should have done this, what we're saying is, I think I should be the one who should be making all the decisions. I should be God. But if God's God and he made one way, then what right do we have to tell him otherwise? It's kind of like if someone comes to you and says, I have the cure for cancer. And you go, that's good, but I want to find a different cure for cancer. Or if the building's burning down and there's one door for you to get out, you don't go looking for another door. You sure there's not another door we could go? I mean, that door's open and there's a pathway out, but I'm going to test every other door. Jesus said, I am the way. And that means for those of us who engage with him, who see what he's done for us, who come to him and say, I'm sorry for the things that I've done. I ask for your forgiveness. I want to come into your family. Then he welcomes us with open arms. He welcomes us into his family, and he desires for us to become the person we were always built to be, designed to be, because he becomes the life within us and guides us in all truth and in every way of our life. Today, if you want to step into that relationship with him, the door is open, wide open for you to accept Jesus. And as part of a connection that we have as a family, we're going to have communion together. So I'm going to pray, and then and if that's for you, if you want to say, Jesus, yeah, I want to come into a relationship with you, then this is your opportunity for that. Afterwards, those who do believe, we're going to be a part of a meal together, a little meal, but one that unites us as his family. Lord God, we just thank you so much that you are